He called me just the babysitter.
So I sent one message to the nanny and watched him panic.
I didn't even feel the humiliation right away. At first it was just a sound. This thin little laugh from the woman in the champagne-colored dress, like she'd been offered something harmless and amusing. Then I realized she was laughing at me, and my face went hot so fast it felt like someone had held a hairdryer to my cheeks. Jordan's hand was still resting on the small of my back, casual, proprietary, like we were a real couple in a real room, and he was smiling with that polished, public grin while he said it again, slower, as if clarifying for her. Tessa's just the babysitter, he told her.
She's a lifesaver.
Keeps the chaos contained. Then he angled his body toward his boss and lifted his glass like he'd just made a clever joke. My throat tightened, and for a second I couldn't get my lungs to do anything except a shallow, stupid inhale that made my chest ache. I looked past him, toward the ballroom's wall of mirrors, and I saw myself there, black dress I'd borrowed from my sister, hair pinned up because Jordan said it looked classy, clutching a small purse like a teenager at prom. I looked like someone waiting for permission to exist in a room she'd helped make possible.
Because that's what I was.
The part one can't stop replaying is what my body did before my brain caught up.
My smile froze.
Not fell, froze. My fingers tightened around my phone in my purse, like I was trying to crush the glass screen through leather. I tasted metal, like I'd bitten my tongue. Jordan leaned in to kiss my cheek, quick, performative, and murmured, "Relax," through the side of his mouth, as if I was about to embarrass him. The woman in the champagne dress, Celeste, I later learned, tilted her head and said, "Oh, how sweet," in a tone that wasn't sweet at all. Behind her, two men in tailored suits glanced over and then looked away, the way people do when they've witnessed something awkward and don't want to own it. I could hear the band warming up somewhere near the stage, the dull thump of a bass note, the clink of ice in glasses, the low hum of 100 conversations. And underneath all of it, like a thin wire pulled tight, was one thought. If I'm just the babysitter, then I'm not obligated to protect his story anymore.
My hand found my phone inside my purse without me even deciding. My thumb unlocked it.
I found the contact labeled Nanny Nina and I typed one message. "Hey Nina, quick question, can you send me your hours for the last 3 weeks and your full name for payroll? Jordan said I'm taking over payments and tax forms."
"Thanks."
I hit send, and I didn't even look up right away. I stared at the tiny delivered checkmark like it was a match being struck.
Then I looked at Jordan. He was still smiling at his boss.
Still playing the charming partner, the steady dad, the man who had everything handled. For half a second, nothing changed. Then his phone, sleek, always face down when he was home with me, lit up on the cocktail table beside him.
I saw his eyes flick down automatically.
The smile slipped.
Not all at once. It twitched, like a muscle misfiring. His fingers tightened around his glass.
Then his face did something I'd never seen in 3 years. It went blank, then sharply alert, like a hunted animal hearing a branch snap. He reached for his phone too fast, knocking the base of his glass against the table so it clinked loudly. Celeste paused mid-sentence.
Jordan didn't notice. He swiped the screen. His pupils widened.
He glanced at me, really glanced, like he was seeing me for the first time in that room, and in his eyes was something I'd been trying not to name for months.
Fear.
He stepped closer, shoulder pressing into mine, and hissed, "What did you do?" I kept my smile on my face because I was still standing in the room, still surrounded by people with money and power and judgment. I leaned toward him like I was about to whisper something affectionate and said, "I asked the nanny for payroll information. Since I'm just the babysitter." Jordan's hand moved like he was going to grab my phone out of my purse, then stopped because his boss was watching.
He swallowed hard. The tendon in his neck jumped.
His phone buzzed again, once, twice, and this time I saw his thumb hesitate over the screen like he didn't want to open it in front of me. Celeste said, "Everything all right," with fake concern.
Jordan forced a laugh that sounded like it hurt. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just work."
"Excuse me one moment." He turned to his boss, said something about a call, and then, with a grip that was not gentle, he guided me away from the group, weaving between tables like he was moving a problem out of sight before it could stain his image. We got to the hallway outside the ballroom, quieter, carpeted, lit with dim sconces, and he stopped so abruptly I nearly walked into him.
His face was different out here. The public smile was gone. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright with anger and panic, a volatile mix that made my stomach flip even though I was the one who'd lit the fuse. "What did you
Do, he repeated, each word measured like he was trying to keep control. I could still hear the band through the walls, still feel the vibration of bass in my ribs. My hands were shaking, but I kept them at my sides because if I lifted them, he'd see. I sent one message, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt, which surprised me. To Nina.
Jordan's nostrils flared. Why?
I tilted my head like I was genuinely curious. Because you introduced me as your babysitter.
His eyes flashed.
It was a joke.
It wasn't funny, I said.
Jordan scoffed, glancing around the hallway like he was worried someone might hear.
You're being dramatic. You always do this. You take something small and you…
Small? I cut in, and my voice cracked slightly, which made him look satisfied for a second, like he'd proven I was unstable.
I hated that I gave him that.
I inhaled slowly. Jordan, you looked my boss's wife in the face and reduced me to the help.
He leaned in, voice low and sharp.
You don't understand how these people think. That sentence, these people, was one I'd heard before.
It was always his shield. His excuse.
His justification for why I had to be quieter, smaller, less visible. Then explain it, I said. Explain why it matters so much that you can't call me your girlfriend. Jordan's phone buzzed again, and this time he couldn't ignore it. He looked down, swiped, then stiffened.
His throat bobbed as he swallowed.
He turned the screen slightly away from me, but I saw enough, an incoming call. The contact photo was a blurred selfie of a woman with dark hair. The name at the top said Nanny Nina.
Jordan hit decline so hard it was almost violent.
Then he stared at me like he wanted to crush me with words. You need to fix this, he said. I blinked. Fix what? He stepped closer, invading my space, voice a harsh whisper.
You cannot involve her. Do you hear me?
You don't. Huh, I repeated, and my stomach did that slow, sinking thing. You mean the nanny? Jordan's eyes flicked, just once, and it told me everything his mouth was trying not to. I felt something cold spread under my skin, like someone had poured ice water down my spine. Why are you panicking?
I asked softly.
If she's just the nanny.
Jordan clenched his jaw.
Because it's none of your business. I stared at him for a long second, letting that sentence land.
None of your business.
About the person he claimed was caring for his children.
About the money he claimed he was paying.
About the schedule that dictated our life. About the woman he kept in his phone with a label that made her sound harmless.
I should have walked away right then. I know that now.
But in the moment, I didn't move. I just stood there, listening to my own pulse thud in my ears. Okay, I said quietly. Then I guess I'm not the babysitter.
I'm not the partner.
I'm just a convenience. Jordan's face tightened. Don't do this here. I didn't, I said, my voice low. You did.
In there. His phone buzzed again. Another call, or a message.
He glanced down reflexively and then shoved the phone into his pocket like it was burning him.
Get your coat, he snapped.
We're leaving.
I laughed once, sharp and humorless.
We're leaving. I repeated. Like I'm your date.
Jordan's eyes narrowed.
Tessa.
Now.
I could have made a scene. I could have said something loud in the hallway, could have walked back into the ballroom and told Celeste and his boss exactly what he'd said, exactly how he'd treated me.
But I didn't want that.
Not because I wanted to protect Jordan. Honestly, by then I wasn't sure what I wanted, but because I didn't want to be the entertainment in a room full of people who would forget my name the moment they got in their cars.
So I got my coat.
I'm going to back up, because if you're reading this and thinking, why would you stay with someone like that?
I get it.
I would ask the same question if it wasn't my life.
I met Jordan when I was 26, at a friend's birthday dinner.
He was 34, divorced, with 2 kids, Lila and Grant, who were then 5 and 7.
He was charming in that careful way some men are when they're used to rooms.
He asked questions, listened like he actually heard your answers, made you feel like you were the only person at the table.
He talked about his kids with this softness that made my chest ache.
He'd lean back in his chair and tell stories about Grant's obsession with dinosaurs, about Lila insisting on wearing mismatched socks because colors have feelings. I remember thinking, God, he's a good dad. Not perfect, but present. He also talked about his divorce like a man who'd been wronged but had grown from it. We just wanted different lives, he said. I didn't want the kids in the middle. He never insulted his ex-wife outright, which made me trust him more. He described her as free-spirited and not built for routine, which, in hindsight, sounds like a compliment until you realize it's also a way to frame someone as irresponsible. At the time, I was freshly out of a relationship where I'd been treated like an accessory.
Jordan felt like a grown-up. Like safety. Like someone who knew what he wanted. He started calling me every day.
He made space for me in his life quickly, and I mistook that intensity for commitment. He introduced me to his kids within 3 months, and I told myself it was because he was serious.
I ignored the part of me that thought it was fast.
The kids were sweet. Cautious at first, like they were testing whether I was real.
I didn't try to be their mom. I didn't do that weird competitive thing some girlfriends do. I just showed up. I brought snacks. I helped with homework.
I learned which cartoons they liked and which foods they hated. I sat on the floor and played with toy dinosaurs until my knees hurt. When they were sick, I offered to help, and Jordan looked at me like I'd performed a miracle.
"You're incredible," he'd say.
"You have no idea how hard this is alone."
That's how it starts, I think. Not with cruelty. With praise. With being needed.
Jordan had a nanny back then, Maribel, a woman in her 50s who'd been with the family since before the divorce.
She was calm and efficient and didn't seem threatened by me.
She'd nod politely when I showed up, and once, when Grant fell and scraped his knee, she handed me the antiseptic like it was obvious I belonged there.
I remember that moment because it made me feel included. Like I wasn't just Jordan's girlfriend. Like I was part of the ecosystem.
Maribel left a year later to move closer to her grandchildren.
Jordan acted devastated.
"I don't know what we'll do," he said, like the house would collapse without her. He interviewed new nannies like he was hiring for a corporate role. He talked about trust and discretion and boundaries. Then he told me he'd found someone perfect, Nina. "Young, energetic, great with the kids," he said.
"She has references. She's in grad school.
Total professional."
I never met Nina.
At first, I didn't think it was strange. Nina's hours were supposedly afternoons, when I was at work. She did pickups, snacks, homework supervision. Jordan handled evenings. I'd come over after work.
Fine.
Then Jordan and I moved in together, his place, because it was bigger and closer to the kids' school. And that's when Nina became this ghost in our life.
Her presence was always referenced. Her shoes were never by the door. Her voice was never in the house.
Her schedule was always just missed you. If I asked, "Oh, I didn't see Nina today," Jordan would say, "She left early," without looking up. If I asked, "Can I meet her?" he'd say, "Why? She's the nanny, not your friend," with a laugh like I was being silly.
There were small moments that should have flagged me sooner.
Like the time Jordan said Nina needed to be paid in cash because it's easier for her. Like the time I found a receipt for a fancy restaurant in Jordan's jacket pocket and he said he took a client there, but the date was a Saturday afternoon when he'd told me he was with the kids at a trampoline park. Like the time Grant asked, out of nowhere, "Why does Dad have a secret friend?" And Jordan laughed too loud and said, "Buddy, no secrets," and then changed the subject so fast it gave me whiplash.
I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be suspicious of a man's nanny story. It sounded like the kind of paranoia people make fun of online. And Jordan was good at making me feel silly for asking. Meanwhile, I was doing more and more in the house.
I was the one packing lunches when Jordan had early meetings. I was the one buying birthday gifts for classmates because Jordan forgot. I was the one remembering which kid needed which permission slip. I started rearranging my work schedule to accommodate school pickups when Jordan said he couldn't. I'd be on my way out the door and Jordan would say, "Can you just grab Grant? Nina's running late."
Nina was always running late. I started thinking Nina was real but incompetent.
I started resenting her in this abstract way, like she was stealing credit for my labor. Which is almost funny now, in a bitter way, because I was resenting a person I didn't even know existed.
Jordan would thank me in private.
"I couldn't do this without you," he'd say, squeezing my hand. "You're basically their second mom."
But in public, he introduced me differently depending on who was listening.
To other parents at school, I was Tessa, my partner. To his friends, I was my girlfriend. To his mother, I was the woman who keeps me sane. And to people who mattered for his image, his boss, his clients, anyone with money, suddenly I was helping out. I didn't notice the pattern at first because I didn't want to. I was so busy trying to be valuable that I ignored the way my value was being defined.
Which brings me back to that fundraiser. That hallway. Jordan's panic.
On the drive home, Jordan didn't speak at first. The city lights blurred past the window like smears of gold. My hands were folded in my lap so tightly my fingers ached. I could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive, and underneath it something else, something sweeter, like a different perfume clinging to fabric.
My stomach turned.
At a red light, his phone buzzed again. He glanced down, face tightening, then turned the phone face down on the console like he was trying to suffocate it. "Who is Nina?"
I asked quietly.
Jordan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "She's the nanny," he said automatically, like a reflex.
"No," I said.
"Who is she really?"
Jordan exhaled like I was exhausting.
"Tessa, not tonight." "Tonight is exactly when," I said, and my voice shook. "Because you called me the babysitter in front of your boss, and then you panicked when I texted the nanny for payroll information. That's not normal."
Jordan's jaw clenched.
"You embarrassed me," he snapped,
suddenly loud. I stared at him.
"I embarrassed you," I repeated, disbelief sharpening my voice. "You humiliated me."
"You made it weird," he said.
"You couldn't just laugh it off."
I let out a shaky breath.
"You think I should laugh off being reduced to staff?"
Jordan's eyes flashed.
"You are being dramatic."
There it was. The familiar move. Minimize. Dismiss. Reset the narrative so I'm the problem.
I looked out the window, because if I looked at him I might start crying, and I refused to cry for him in that moment. My chest felt tight, like grief had hands around it. When we got home, the house was quiet. The kids were at Jordan's ex-wife's for the weekend. The hallway light was on, casting a warm glow that felt suddenly fake. Jordan tossed his keys into the bowl by the door and turned to me like he was bracing for battle.
"Give me your phone," he said. I blinked. "No." His eyes narrowed. "Tessa, I need to see what you sent."
"You already know what I sent," I said. "I told you." "I need to fix it," he said through clenched teeth.
"That's interesting," I said quietly.
"Because if Nina is just the nanny, there's nothing to fix. It's payroll paperwork."
Jordan took a step toward me.
"Stop," he warned. "Stop what?" I asked, and my voice rose slightly. "Stop noticing? Stop asking questions?
Stop wanting basic respect."
Jordan's phone buzzed again, and this time he snatched it up and walked away from me toward the kitchen. He answered in a low voice, back turned. I followed, not to eavesdrop, just because I couldn't stand being shut out in my own home. I stopped at the kitchen doorway.
Jordan's voice was tight.
"Not now," he hissed. "I told you, don't call me." "No," I said, "don't call." He glanced over his shoulder and saw me.
His eyes widened.
He turned his body away, lowering his voice further. "Just stop.
I'll handle it."
He hung up and spun toward me, face flushed with anger. "That," I said, voice trembling, "didn't sound like a nanny." Jordan's mouth opened, then closed. He stared at me for a long second, and in that pause I felt the weight of every time he'd made me feel silly. Every time he'd said I was imagining things. Every time he'd used the kids as a shield. Then he said, very quietly, "You had no right."
It wasn't an apology.
It wasn't even a denial.
It was ownership.
Like I'd touched something that belonged to him.
I swallowed hard.
"Is Nina real?" I asked. Jordan's eyes flicked away. "Of course she's real." "Then why have I never met her?" I pressed. "Why doesn't she ever leave a coat? Why don't the kids ever talk about her like they talked about Maribel? Why does she call you at night?"
Jordan's jaw tightened.
"Because you're not her employer," he snapped.
"I am." I stared at him.
"But I'm the one doing the childcare half the time," I said. "I'm the one rearranging my life. I'm the one." "You're helping," he cut in sharply.
"That's it.
You're helping."
My hands went cold.
I felt like I'd stepped off a curb I didn't know was there. "Helping," I repeated, voice small. Jordan's face softened for half a second, like he realized he'd gone too far. "Tessa," he said, tone shifting, "don't make this bigger than it is." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You made it big when you called me just the babysitter."
Jordan rubbed his forehead.
"That was for my boss," he muttered, as if that explained everything. "And what am I?" I asked. "When your boss isn't looking?" Jordan's silence lasted too long. Then his phone buzzed again.
A message this time. He looked down before he could stop himself. His face went pale.
I saw it in the reflection of the microwave door, the message preview from Nanny Nina. Why is she asking me for payroll info? Who is Tessa to you? Jordan stared at it, then at me, then back at the phone like he was trying to rearrange reality.
My stomach dropped.
I pointed at his screen. That's not a nanny, I said, voice shaking with certainty now. A nanny wouldn't say who is Tessa to you. A nanny would know who I am.
Jordan's mouth tightened.
You don't understand, he whispered, and it sounded like the weakest defense in the world.
I felt my eyes sting, but I blinked hard.
Then explain it, I said. Right now. Jordan exhaled sharply, like he was deciding how much truth he could afford. Nina isn't the nanny, he admitted finally, and the words landed like a chair collapsing under me. I didn't move. I just stared at him, waiting for the rest, because there's always a rest. She helps sometimes, he said quickly, like that softened it.
She's a friend. She.
A friend, I repeated, voice rising. You have her saved as nanny in your phone.
Jordan's face hardened. Because it's easier, he snapped.
Because I didn't want drama. There it is, I said, my voice shaking with rage and something like grief. You didn't want drama, so you lied to me and made me feel insane.
Jordan's eyes flashed.
I never said you were insane.
You didn't have to, I said.
You made me feel ridiculous every time I asked anything. He stepped toward me, hands lifted like he was trying to calm me down. Tessa, listen. Nina is complicated. Complicated, I echoed, and I almost laughed. That's what people say when they don't want to say the ugly word.
Jordan's jaw clenched.
It's not what you think.
My voice went very quiet.
Then tell me exactly what it is.
Jordan hesitated. His throat bobbed.
She and we've been seeing each other, he admitted.
The room went silent.
Not literally. There was still the hum of the fridge, the faint sound of traffic outside. But in my body, everything went quiet, like my brain had turned down the volume to protect itself. Seeing each other, I repeated, and my voice sounded far away. Jordan rushed forward, hands out. Tessa, it didn't start like that. It was. How long? I interrupted, because if I let him talk, he'd wrap it in excuses. Jordan's eyes flicked away. A few months. A few months, I repeated, and suddenly my knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of the counter. While I was living here.
Jordan's face tightened.
Yes. While I was cooking dinner. While I was driving Grant to soccer practice. While I was waking up at 6 to pack lunches. While I was telling the kids their dad was busy because I didn't want them to feel rejected. And you called me the babysitter, I whispered, and it wasn't even anger anymore.
It was disbelief.
Like my mind was trying to fit all the puzzle pieces together and couldn't because the picture was too ugly.
Jordan's voice softened. I didn't mean it like that.
What did you mean?
I snapped, the rage returning. Because it sounded like you meant I was the help. The placeholder.
The person who makes your life easier while you, what, go play pretend with your friend.
Jordan flinched. Don't talk about it like that.
Like what?
I shot back.
Like what it is.
Jordan's face hardened.
You're overreacting.
I stared at him.
Overreacting, I said slowly, and I felt something in me shift.
Not explode. Shift. Like a door quietly closing.
Jordan stepped closer. Tessa, listen.
Nina isn't important.
She was just.
Don't, I said, sharply. Don't reduce her now. You reduce me in front of your bus.
You don't get to reduce her to make me feel better.
Jordan's eyes narrowed. So what?
Now you're defending her. I'm defending reality, I said. Because you've been living in a fake one. He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard like he was the victim here. This is why I didn't tell you, he muttered. You can't handle things calmly. I laughed, and it came out broken. You didn't tell me because you wanted both, I said. You wanted a woman at home raising your kids and making you look stable, and you wanted, I gestured vaguely, because saying mistress felt too dramatic and too accurate at the same time. Jordan's phone buzzed again. He looked down instinctively, then swore. Stop, he muttered at the screen, typing quickly. I watched him type, and something about it, how practiced he looked, how quickly his thumbs moved, made my stomach turn.
This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a habit. I picked up my purse.
My hands were shaking again, but now it was adrenaline, not shock. Where are you going?
Jordan snapped. I looked at him.
Somewhere I'm not just the babysitter, I said, and I surprised myself with how steady it sounded.
Jordan stepped toward me, blocking the kitchen doorway.
You can't just leave, he said. We need to talk.
We've been talking, I said.
You've been lying, I've been listening.
Jordan's eyes flashed.
You're being selfish.
Selfish. After everything.
I stared at him for a long moment, then said, Move.
Jordan didn't move. His jaw clenched.
His shoulders squared like he was preparing to win.
And that's the part that still makes me feel sick.
Not the cheating itself, though that hurts, but the way he was so used to controlling the narrative that he thought he could physically stand in my way and I backed down. I took a step closer, and quietly, I said, If you don't move, I will call your ex-wife and tell her you've been bringing a stranger into the orbit of your children and lying about who she is.
Jordan went still. His eyes widened just slightly. Fear again. Not for me.
Not for our relationship.
For consequences.
Don't, he hissed.
Then move, I said. He moved. I left that night.
I drove to my sister's apartment with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. Halfway there I had to pull over because my body started shaking so hard I couldn't breathe properly. I sat in the car with the hazard lights blinking and cried until my face went numb. The next morning, Jordan texted me paragraphs. Apologies that didn't feel like apologies. Explanations that sounded like strategy. He said Nina didn't mean anything. He said he was confused. He said he felt pressured and lonely and misunderstood.
He said I'd been distant lately.
Which was almost funny, because I'd been distant only in the sense that I was exhausted from holding his life together. He also said, Please don't tell Brooke.
Brooke is his ex-wife.
The kid's mom. The woman he'd always framed as irresponsible and dramatic and unstable. I stared at that text for a long time, and something uncomfortable settled in my chest. Because if he was so terrified of Brooke knowing, maybe Brooke wasn't as irrational as he'd made her sound. Maybe she'd simply seen him clearly before I did. I didn't respond right away. I didn't want to make decisions in the raw heat of betrayal. But I also couldn't ignore the fact that there were 2 kids involved, kids who didn't ask for their dad to be sloppy with adult secrets. I'm going to skip some of the back and forth here because it was repetitive and honestly humiliating to relive. Jordan oscillated between begging and blaming. 1 hour he was sorry, the next he was angry that I overstepped by texting Nina. He kept returning to that, my message, as if the problem was the match, not the fire. 2 days later, he showed up at my sister's place. No warning. Just knocked like he had a right. My sister, Leah, opened the door and her face hardened. Leah is older than me and has never liked Jordan. She clocked him early in a way I ignored because I wanted the relationship to work. She stepped into the doorway like a bouncer. Tessa doesn't want to talk, Leah said. Jordan's eyes flicked past her into the apartment. Tessa, he called, like I was a dog who'd wandered. I walked to the doorway because I refused to hide in my sister's home like I'd done something wrong. I stood behind Leah and looked at him. Jordan looked tired. His eyes were bloodshot. His hair was messy in a way that felt deliberate, like he wanted to look like a man suffering. He held his phone in his hand like he was ready to show me something. Tess, he said softly. Can we talk? Leah said, No. Jordan ignored her. I made a mistake, he said. I'm ending it with Nina. I already did. I stared at him. Why was she saved as nanny? I asked, because that detail still burned. It wasn't just deceit. It was concealment. It was calculation. Jordan's face tightened. Because I didn't want questions, he muttered. Because you didn't want accountability, I corrected. He looked at me with a flash of irritation. You're twisting everything into a moral lecture. Leah made a sound, like a laugh without humor. You cheated on her, Leah said flatly. There's no lecture needed. Jordan flinched as if the word cheated was rude. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. It wasn't. It was exactly like that, I said, and my voice surprised me again with its steadiness. You kept me at home doing childcare while you had a relationship with someone else. Jordan's eyes narrowed. You make it sound like I trapped you. I stared at him. You introduced me as just the babysitter, I said quietly. In front of your boss. Jordan's jaw clenched. I told you, it was a joke,
I cut in. A strategy. A signal to everyone in that room that I'm not your equal. Jordan took a step closer, lowering his voice like he was trying to pull me back into our private dynamic. Tessa, please, he said. I need you. The kids need you. Grant asked where you are. That sentence hit me hard. Not because I believed he needed me, but because the kids were real. Their confusion was real. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them back. Don't use them, I said, voice tight. Don't use your kids as a leash. Jordan's face hardened. So you're just going to abandon them? Leah's body tensed. Don't you dare, she said. I swallowed. I'm not abandoning them, I said. I'm leaving you. There's a difference. Jordan scoffed. They love you, he said. You're punishing them because you're mad at me. That one almost broke me, because it was such a cruel twisting of reality. He was making me responsible for damage he caused. I took a breath. You're the one who created this mess, I said. If the kids are hurt, it's because you chose to risk their stability. Jordan's eyes flashed. I chose. Yes, I said, sharper now. You chose. You keep acting like things happened to you. Like you fell into Nina by accident. You chose this. He stared at me, jaw clenched, then said, quieter. You can't tell Brooke. There it was again. Not I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. The fear of consequences. Leah's laugh was cold. Wow, she said. That's your priority. Jordan ignored her, eyes on me. If you tell her, he said slowly, she'll use it against me. I stared at him. Maybe she should, I said. Jordan's face went pale. Tessa. You lied about who Nina was, I said. You labeled her nanny like she was part of your children's care. If you're willing to blur that boundary, Brooke deserves to know. The kids deserve safety. Jordan's voice rose. You're trying to ruin my life. I felt something harden in me. No, I said. I'm refusing to keep it tidy for you. Jordan's eyes narrowed, then he switched tactics again. His voice softened. Please, he said. Let's talk privately. Leah stepped forward. No. Jordan glared at her. This is between me and Tessa. Leah didn't flinch. You made it my business when you knocked on my door. Jordan turned back to me, and his expression, this mixture of entitlement and panic, made something uncomfortable click into place. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a resource he'd misplaced. Something he could retrieve. I looked at him and said, go home. Jordan stared at me, then his face twisted. Fine, he snapped. Have it your way. But don't come crying when you realize you threw away something good. He turned and stormed off down the hallway. Leah shut the door and leaned her back against it. You okay? She asked gently. I stared at the door for a long moment, then whispered, he still thinks he's the good thing. Leah nodded, like she wasn't surprised. That's the point, she said. That night, after pacing for hours, I called Brooke. I didn't want to. I dreaded it. I'd only met Brooke a handful of times, and Jordan always made those meetings tense in a subtle way. He'd warn me beforehand, she can be manipulative. He'd sigh afterward, see what I mean? Brooke never did anything outrageous. If anything, she seemed tired, guarded, like someone who'd spent years being told she was too much. When she answered, her voice was cautious. Hello. Brooke, I said, and my throat tightened. It's Tessa. A pause. Is everything all right? She asked, and there was something in her tone that sounded like she already suspected the answer. I swallowed. I'm calling because I need to tell you something about Jordan, I said. Brooke went quiet. Then she said, carefully, okay. I told her. Not every detail. Not the fundraiser humiliation. Not my sister's doorway. Just the relevant part. Jordan has been seeing someone else. He saved her as nanny in his phone. He said she was part of childcare when she wasn't. I told Brooke because the kids' safety matters. Brooke didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't act shocked. She just exhaled slowly, like someone hearing confirmation of something they already knew. Is her name Nina? Brooke asked. My stomach dropped. Yes, I said softly. You know her? Brooke made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Of course, she said, voice dry. Jordan's been circling her since we were married. She was a friend.
She was someone from work. He always had a story.
I felt cold. So, this isn't new, I whispered. Brooke's voice tightened.
It's new that he's sloppy enough to label her nanny, she said. That's impressively stupid, even for him. I let out a shaky breath, half relief, half nausea. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't want to drop this on you.
Brooke paused.
Thank you for telling me, she said, and her voice softened just slightly. I know that wasn't easy.
I swallowed.
I feel like I'm betraying the kids, I admitted. You're not, Brooke said firmly. He betrayed them when he decided his ego mattered more than stability.
Her words hit me hard because they were so clear. No drama.
No manipulation.
Just clarity.
Before we hung up, Brooke said, he's going to blame you.
I know, I said. He'll say you're bitter, she continued. He'll say you're trying to ruin him. Don't believe that.
This is who he is. After I hung up, I sat on Leah's couch staring at the blank TV screen, feeling like my life had been rearranged without my consent. I kept thinking about that moment in the ballroom when Jordan called me the babysitter.
It wasn't just an insult.
It was a revelation. It was him telling the truth in public. My role was to support his image, not share his life. The next week, Jordan tried to regain control. He texted me photos of the kids, like bait. Grant misses you.
Lila asked about you.
He asked if I could come by and say goodbye properly.
He promised he'd be calm. He promised he wouldn't yell. He promised a lot of things. I almost went.
I pictured Grant's face, the way he scrunches his nose when he laughs. I pictured Lila's hair always slightly messy, her little hands gripping mine when we crossed the street.
I felt like I was ripping something living out of my chest.
But then I remembered Jordan in the hallway, hissing, "You need to fix this." Like I was responsible for the consequences of his lies. He'll say you're bitter, she continued.
He'll say you're trying to ruin him. Don't believe that.
This is who he is. After I hung up, I sat on Leah's couch staring at the blank TV screen, feeling like my life had been rearranged without my consent. I kept thinking about that moment in the ballroom when Jordan called me the babysitter.
It wasn't just an insult. It was a revelation.
It was him telling the truth in public. My role was to support his image, not share his life. The next week, Jordan tried to regain control. He texted me photos of the kids, like bait. Grant misses you.
Lila asked about you.
He asked if I could come by and say goodbye properly.
He promised he'd be calm. He promised he wouldn't yell. He promised a lot of things. I almost went.
I pictured Grant's face, the way he scrunches his nose when he laughs. I pictured Lila's hair always slightly messy, her little hands gripping mine when we crossed the street.
I felt like I was ripping something living out of my chest.
But then I remembered Jordan in the hallway, hissing, "You need to fix this." Like I was responsible for the consequences of his lies. I told Brooke I'd like to see the kids one more time, but only if it was okay with her. Brooke agreed, and we arranged it for a Saturday morning at a park, neutral ground.
Brooke brought the kids. Jordan wasn't there. I didn't want him there.
Grant ran at me like a missile, and it nearly knocked the air out of me. Lila hugged my waist and didn't let go for a long time. I knelt in the grass and held them and tried to keep my face calm so I wouldn't scare them. "Are you coming back?" Lila asked, and her voice was small.
I swallowed hard.
"I'm not going to live at Dad's house anymore," I said gently.
"But I care about you both a lot." Grant's eyes got watery. "Did we do something?" he asked, and that sentence shattered me.
"No," I said quickly, cupping his cheek.
"No, sweetheart. This is grown-up stuff."
"You didn't do anything."
They asked why. I didn't give them details.
I just said sometimes adults make choices that hurt people and it means things have to change. I hated the vagueness, but kids don't need the weight of adult betrayal. Brooke watched from a bench, arms crossed, face tight. At one point she walked over and said softly, "You're good with them," like it surprised her.
I swallowed.
"I tried," I said. Brooke nodded once, then said, "That's more than he deserves." After the park, I got in my car and sat there for a long time before turning the key.
My chest felt raw. My eyes burned.
I was grieving not just a relationship, but the life I'd been building, quietly, diligently, while Jordan built something else in secret. Jordan, of course, didn't take my distance gracefully. He showed up at my workplace one afternoon, standing outside the building like he belonged there.
When I walked out and saw him, my stomach clenched. "We need to talk," he said.
"No," I said, and kept walking.
He followed.
"Tessa."
I turned and looked at him.
He looked tired again, but now there was irritation under it. "You told Brooke," he accused.
I stared at him.
"Yes," I said.
Jordan's face hardened.
"You had no right."
I let out a slow breath.
"You used a fake nanny label to hide an affair," I said. "I had every right."
Jordan's eyes flashed.
"Brooke is using it," he snapped.
"She's threatening court.
She's trying to take more custody."
I stared at him. "And?" Jordan looked like I'd slapped him. "And you don't care?" I felt something heavy and cold settle in my chest.
"I care about the kids," I said. "I don't care about protecting you from consequences."
Jordan's jaw clenched.
"You're doing this because you're bitter." I laughed once, low. "You called me just the babysitter," I said. "I think you mistake bitterness for clarity." Jordan stepped closer.
"You're throwing away a life," he said, voice rising.
"We had something."
I looked at him and felt a strange calm.
"We had a role,"
I corrected. "I filled it. You benefited."
"That's not the same as us having something."
Jordan stared at me, then his voice lowered.
"You're going to regret this."
"Maybe. Grief is messy. Regret is possible."
But staying would have been a slower kind of regret, one where I kept shrinking until I couldn't recognize myself. I met his eyes and said, "The only thing I regret is not texting Nanny Nina sooner."
Jordan's face went pale.
For a second, I saw that fear again, the fear of being exposed. Then he scoffed, turned sharply, and walked away like I was beneath him. After that, I blocked his number.
It's been a while now.
I don't want to slap a clean ending on this because it didn't end clean. It ended like most real things end, with loose threads and awkward silences and nights where I lie awake replaying conversations and wondering when exactly I stopped being a person and started being a function in his life.
Sometimes I miss Jordan.
Or I miss the version of him I thought was real. The man who talked softly about dinosaur facts, who kissed my forehead in the kitchen, who said, "We're a team." And then I remember how easily he called me the babysitter when it suited him. How he panicked not because he hurt me, but because I threatened his cover story. That's the part that doesn't sit right. Not the cheating, even, though yes, that hurts.
It's the entitlement.
The belief that I should quietly accept whatever role he assigns me, and if I don't, I'm dramatic. Here's what I think now, and it's not a comforting thought. Being diminished in public is not an accident.
It's a test. It's someone checking how little they can give you and still keep you. Jordan called me the babysitter because he wanted to see if I'd swallow it. If I'd smile. If I'd keep the machine running.
I didn't.
Not that night. And yeah, it was petty to text the nanny contact in that exact moment. It wasn't some noble, planned move. It was a flash of anger and self-preservation.
But it also revealed something important. When someone's story depends on you staying quiet, one small question can collapse the whole thing. Thanks for watching, and if you've ever been minimized like that, called just something when you were doing the real work, share your story in the comments.
I'm not asking for perfect endings.
I'm honestly more interested in the messy ones, the ones where you realize too late what role you were playing, and you have to decide whether to keep auditioning for respect or walk off the stage.